Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think we've ever talked about how close we were growing up.
Well, we're 2 years apart. That's
Right.
pretty.
Yeah, I think we're 2 years apart, and both of us were born in the U.S.
Right.
Our older brother was born in Korea and is 8 years older than me, 6 years older than Martin, and so he kind of had a different life than the two of us had.
Mhm.
And so I think in that sense, earlier on in our childhood, we were closer, but we also clearly had different groups of friends. Like, we're not the
Mhm.
types of brothers who had the same set of friends through childhood
Mhm.
that some folks do.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
I think we did play similar sports, and so that kept us close in some ways. And we have some fond memories of playing like our own homemade version of Stratego. Is it called Stratego?
Stratomatic.
Stratomatic baseball.
Oh, it sounds familiar.
Which used baseball cards and dice and probability to play. It's kind of like early Xbox Major League Baseball.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about now. Oh, okay. So you guys were both sports fans growing up as kids then?
Yeah.
Oh, are you guys still sports fans now to this day?
I follow it, but
yeah,
I'm not avid.
Oh, I see. So casual is more or less for where you are with this, right, Martin?
Yeah, well, since my son is now older, he was a pretty good baseball player, so I followed a lot of baseball, up until he stopped playing. And now I just kind of check the scores and see if there's any scores out there.
Oh, I see. And then for you, Rich, right now, is that more or less just kind of the same thing that you're into?
It's definitely a conversation that I have with my friends, and I follow it, and I'll go to games. And my kid right now is playing baseball, so I do a lot of, like, this week, every night is baseball night. So that's been fun.
When now you guys, going through this experience now with the comics, do you believe that's actually made your guys' relationship that much stronger? You guys feel much more closer, or feel more, understanding of one another as a result of this medium kind of being the driving force for what you guys are wanting to express in the situation that we're in with right now? Is that you guys feel like that has helped out in some degree?
Oh, I think so, for sure. I mean,
Okay.
Like we were telling Pat, like, we did not talk a whole lot during basically since I left home in my early 20s till just recently, in like 30 years. Why that was, I don't know. I guess we can dive really deep if we wanted to into all.
Right.
But like we told Patrick, like, with everything that's happened over the past year, and I just needed to get my feelings out.
Right.
And I just started texting actually both my brothers, and and Rich just started putting words to what I was feeling. And then the trip before I moved, a couple weeks ago, we spent a week together, and we, got to talk like in person and sitting by the fire and, sharing stories. And I think that was something, I know for sure that was something we've never done. And just to be able to have that moment, and, I personally, I feel like the comics has brought us closer together. Like, we're able to talk about things, and, I'm still evolving as a person, and, Rich has helped a lot in that. And, he used to make fun of me about how I used to be. And, now I'm changing, and I'm learning, and I'm trying to figure it all out.
I see. What about for you, Rich, though? Like, do you have this, do you share the same sentiments in that, and with what your brother was talking here?
Yeah, I mean, Martin moved, to Olympia, Washington 28 years ago. And I was in grad school at the time, and we were just really living very different lives. And back then, you didn't have technology to help keep you connected, right? I mean, it was a long distance phone call was really expensive, so you couldn't even do that.
Yeah.
But I think back then, I was the conduit for my parents to stay. Like, I would check in with Martin so I could communicate to my parents how he was doing. And that was my role in the family, was to sort of find out what Martin's doing, however sporadically it was, and then communicate that to my parents. And I kind of just played that role for many years.
But how did you feel about that, though? Because I know people like that growing up, where they were essentially the, more or less, I guess you could say, like the buffer, the mediator of the family, if you will. I myself was one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel like it was a responsibility that you dreaded, or was it something that you just did it, never thought of it? Like, what was that process like for you?
You know, well, okay, first of all, I'm a psychologist.
Right.
So it's kind of in my training to feel, you know, that responsibility.
Right.
But also I was personally very close to my mom,
Okay.
and it was kind of an obligation in that respect. But also I really wanted to know what Martin was doing and, communicate that and to reassure my parents. I think they worried a lot about my brother. Well, I know they worried a lot about my brother back then.
So Mark, were you kind of just moving away to find yourself, or to get away from something that you felt like was maybe holding you back? I mean, what was like the reason for that separation from being out in the East Coast, going down to the West Coast?
Well, I don't know. I in my early 20s, I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and being the middle child, growing up in an immigrant family, and wanting my entire life to just assimilate. I want to be like everyone else.
Right.
I wanted to be accepted, and in those early days, in my late teens, early 20s, I discovered the Grateful Dead, and that suddenly became my community. Where I felt like I was understood, and so I kind of lived that life, and then just getting away from Connecticut, and Olympia, Washington was the farthest I could think of that was not California, and I went out there to attend school, and my adult life kind of started to happen from there. So yeah, I look back now and I kind of feel like, I had many wonderful experiences in Olympia. I grew up there. I became a man. If I had to do it all over again, I would do it differently.
Okay.
I just feel, now looking back, feeling like, wanting to be like everyone else, it's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I should have just remained true to myself and just been me. But, you're getting pressures from everyone to be, to live the American dream, right?
True.
And, so here I am now. My world, I feel like my world has now just started. Once I started making the comics, I kind of woke up, and I'm seeing the world in a different way. So basically from, high school to this past year, it's all been the same. Like I've just been sleepwalking and doing what I thought I was supposed to do, to be like everyone else, to be accepted, to do good work, to try and make change. But it was not really my dream. It was the dream that I thought I was supposed to have, to be accepted, that the quality of my work and what I did would show. But then, with everything happening in Atlanta and all this stuff, all this stuff flooded back to me. And I realized, like there were a lot of times that I was just taken advantage of. I would do the work and other people would get the credit. I would do the work and I'd have all the credentials, and people who didn't have credentials would get jobs, and I'd be left holding the bag. And, when you're going through it at the time, you just keep plugging along, like kind of like what our parents taught us was like, just keep working hard, keep your head down, keep working hard, and, you'll be rewarded. But the rewards never came. I mean, I did good work. People cared about me. People loved me. But at the same time, it was, I feel like now it could have been more, and I could have done better, and made more change than I did.
So what about for you, Rich?
Yeah, this is where I think, this is where Martin and I really made different decisions early in our lives that really made our paths diverge really far, right? Because at that point in my high school life, where I was feeling like this is not what I want in my life, I don't want to be in this environment. I don't want to be in Connecticut. I don't want to be in this high school. I don't want to be among these people. So I did everything in my power to advance myself in a way that would make me self-reliant and pursuing what I want to pursue. You know, and so, you know, what happened was actually, so Martin by this point had graduated high school, gone off to college, struggled, dropped out of college. And I was going through my own sort of identity crisis as a junior in high school, and just really challenging authority and not finding my place anymore in high school. And then they told me, like, we don't want you to come back to this high school at the end of junior year. So then I was like, crap, what am I going to do? I can't go back from my last year. I'd have to go back to a public school for 1 year. And so
because you guys were in a Catholic high school, is that right? That's what you said earlier? Okay.
So I fortunately found the college brochure that said, why wait to go to college? And it was a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, Simon's Rock College of Bard, that was designed for kids to leave high school early. Those are the only students they accepted, students without a high school diploma. And that's where Joel and Ethan Cohen went. That's where Rowan Farrow went. You know, later, these are other people.
Yeah, I know they are.
And so that's where I went. And that really just hard pivoted my life to a different direction. Like, there is a place where I could do my own thing. And it really just gave me a different world experience, a life experience. Like, all these kids were misfits. All these kids they were smart, but just total misfits in many ways, you know?
Right.
And then I found academia, and I found, like, I loved learning. I loved getting challenged and being able to pursue questions. So fast forward many, many years, you know, Martin's starting to do this comic and trying to figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God, this aligns so well with what I've been trying to do. I didn't have the talent, the art to do what Martin does so well and so naturally, which is visually put words to an image, right? And communicate all the things that I've been studying and learning, but in an accessible way to the public.
Interesting. Well, so, you know, with the comic medium being as a way to start that, you guys are you guys also considering somewhere down the line to look at other forms of expressions for you to tell these stories and to
I don't know. Right now I'm just trying to, you know, create the comics, make them successful, make them accessible. I'd love to see it turned into a book. I'd love to see it taught in classrooms. You know, you know, I'd like to make a living off of it, of course, you know, but right now it's part therapy and part passion of getting the word out. Like, it's, you know, it's a good thing that Rich is the kind of wordsmith, you know, like he gives me the content because I have all the feelings. I just don't know how to express it. You know, I can draw it, you know, I can paint it, but I need the words. And so that's where he's coming in, and, you know, where it's going to lead, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit afraid because I would love for it to blow up and become really successful. But at the same time, like, where I am right now and seeing what's going on in the world, I have a huge distaste for people with money. Like, watching people like Jeff Bezos and people like Elon Musk and all that, it drives me crazy. You know, seeing how rich people take advantage of everyone else, you know, like, why is the 1% running the world? You know, and yeah, and with the pandemic and everything, and seeing, you know, so many people struggle, and at the same time seeing all these people make so much money, and not just the 1%ers, but like regular people, just some people are thriving, you know, and others are struggling, and I don't really know what to do with all that, and I have all this kind of resentment and anger, and, you know, And so Rich is kind of helping me kind of put it
So
in
right.
form.
So for me, it's like, how can we use the comics then to inform, educate, uplift, empower people who maybe had those feelings, but they couldn't put it to words, right? Or couldn't put it into action. And also to feel validated for the first time, right? And then for those with privilege and with power, for them to develop more empathy and more perspective. So to me, I find like maybe for, I think for me, I see a lot of hope in the future, but we have to contribute to creating that hope. I think Martin's kind of the opposite, where he sees, what's the hope when it's all controlled by 1% and they're out to just exploit the world.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of this weird balance of,
we're the yin and yang.
Right. So I was gonna say,
I didn't want
you
to
guys
say
are
yin yang because it sounds so Orientalist to say that.
Well, I mean, so you guys clearly have your approach and how you are wanting to communicate. Obviously, Martin, you're more in the visual aspect, and then Rich, you're more in the and as far as how Martin has said, you're the wordsmith. And I could definitely can tell with your guys' personality, there's a distinction between the two and how you guys approach these things. So it's very obvious for me that those differences actually help combine this medium for you to be able to express the exact same sentence. I'm certain that you guys do have with most things here to get this point across. But another thing too with the comic books and even with television as well, there has been a change in this the system now where we're actually starting to see more people of color, a lot more people of color now, to the point where we're just in the last couple of months alone. The first thing that comes to mind right now is with the announcements of new superheroes that are going to be introduced into these movies, particularly with DC films, where the actors that they've hired are Hispanic. And over 10 years ago, that would have never been the case at all. The character of Supergirl is being played by an Hispanic woman. The character of Batwoman, rather, or Batgirl, I believe, is being played by a Hispanic. It would never been the case over 10 years ago. It would have been a white person through and through. And we would understand that that's because that's how they were presented in the comic books. It's understandable that we just accept it because that's just the way that it is. But what was interesting for me is that they are casting them in the parts of these characters that were white in the comics, but are being played by a person of color. And that to me was what I've always dreamed would happen. Not because I want more Hispanics. It's not just that. It's just that I didn't want the race to be the reason for that. It's just a good actor playing the part, playing this character. Will they do the character justice? That's all that matters to me. But it just so happens to be that we're adding more people of color to do these things, giving more opportunities for other people out there to try these things, because we would never had those opportunities before. So, I mean, despite what you said earlier, Mario, how you had this resentment with certain things, but seeing that though, do you feel any sort of hope that, okay, things are starting to turn around? I do feel something is changing here. This has got to be a start. I mean,
it's funny that you asked that, because right before we started this interview, I was watching one of the panel discussions on Comic-Con from this past weekend, and David F. Walker was on it, and talking about diversity in comics,
right,
and talking about how exactly what you're saying. There are more people of color in the big two, Marvel and DC, and this kind of wave of the BIPOC community being represented.
Right.
And the guy who was talking said, I don't know if it's going to last. And I see David Walker in the corner of the screen shaking his head going, it's not going to, and I respect him a lot. And I took his words or his actions and thinking to myself again, like, they're just trying to make money. Like, they're riding the wave because it is here. Everyone's talking about it. George Floyd, the hate crimes, all that. Like, they know that this is the right thing to do. It's like why the big corporations, give money to certain groups, when they weren't before. Do I think it's great? Yes, I think it's wonderful. I just wish they will just continue to do it, not just do it for this short time, and then we watch it all disappear again. So I have these mixed emotions about it, because
I'm in the same boat as you, to be completely frank, as well. But what about for you, Rich? I mean, do you have any opinions about that as well?
Yeah, I was thinking about how having more diverse representation can only go so far.
Right.
What I don't want to see is, oh, let's make Superman, Latino, but then not change the context or the content or this, that, in other words, if Superman is going to be Latino, then have a Latino lens in the way in which he's experiencing the world, the way in which he sees the world.
Okay.
And create that complexity and depth of character rather than this one-dimensional, oh, now we have a brown Superman. Hey, then we'll have a black Superman. Then we'll have an indigenous Superman, but they're all flat and caricatures of our cultures and our communities and the way in which we are experiencing systemic racism. I mean, that needs to be part of the storyline.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then that's not advancing racial justice. That's just a superficial money-making grab, right?
So you're not really confident with the approach that's being taken right now with these sudden changes there? Because I mean, truthfully, there is a part of me that says, I'm glad this is happening. There is a part of me that believes that
well, it's
does
like,
have
okay,
that sentiment.
like, Kim's Convenience, right?
Oh my God.
Was a TV show. It's on 5 seasons, just got canceled. And, the showrunner was a white writer.
Yeah.
And it was actually two writers, right? One was Asian, one was white. And then they pushed out the Asian Canadian and they kept the white writer. And, and it was all Asian Canadian, Asian American cast. And then finally, it was just a mess by the end, right? And now you see the underbelly of the production of that show playing out. Yeah, I think for me with that show, at least from how I've read the stories coming out and the actors now speaking up, the actors really contributed a lot to making that show have
an authentic
character,
voice.
an authentic voice. Because, there was one example where the actor who plays the mom was sharing how they were trying to make this scene where I think it was, they got sick from eating bulgogi or kalbi, which is a, soy marinated Korean
they got sick
barbecue. And then, but then kimchi. They were trying to get sick eating kimchi, right? And then she's like, wait a minute. Kimchi is fermented and full of probiotics. It's really hard to get sick eating kimchi. And she's like, we got to change that. And then they changed it to bulgogi, right? They changed it. That's right. Because they were like, we need to make it something where you might be actually able to get sick from it being spoiled.
But that's the problem with having white writers.
Right.
Yeah. And experience,
Right. That's right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the entertainment system is still, because I was talking to Loy about this a while ago, and this has nothing to do with the situation of people of color, but the system in itself is still stuck in the old ways where before I was talking with Loy about how the way people are promoting movies, you ask the same questions over and over again. Podcasting and long form interviews has changed that, where you can take the time to build up the conversation and take it different directions, and then eventually get back to why the person was there in the first place. So there's a lot more room to play around with and really get to know the person very well, in hopes that will intrigue the audience to say, you know what, I like this guy, I will check out the movie, not because the movie's fantastic and everyone was great. No, we heard that before. So the system hasn't changed at all, is how I see it. And we talked about the white writers running the show and how they pretty much put their thoughts on what they think should be funny or what should be added to the show. And then someone else says, no, that's not how it's done. So, that's the part that really gets me, I wouldn't say concerned, but definitely I'm hesitant about how fast things will change, because I think the people that are behind the scenes are saying we need more people of color, but it's more about, because this is going to sell more now that people are more aware of this here and they want to see more of this. So let's just put them in place so we can have more variety for people out there to want to see the movie. That's how I perceive it to be more these days. It's nice to see these changes occur, but part of me doesn't believe it's a very authentic and very genuine approach to make the change for all the right reasons, how I see it. So with that, with films, that's one thing, but also with music, I've come to realize that there have been a lot of bands out there that do feature people of color that was where the color was never a thing. The music was the main focus. I think that's where music is ahead of films in that regard, where there's a constant climate change with the way the music has evolved. Punk music being a really big example. Like one of the biggest punk bands in the world that is still cream of the crop in my opinion is Bad Brains. All black members, didn't even make that didn't even concern that wasn't even a thing for me. The music was great, they just happened to be black. And then the political message they incorporate with their music was another factor that I really believe helped make the music that much better. Rage Against Machine, you have Tom Morello, who's of mixed race, Zach De La Rocha, who's also mixed race as well too. Didn't matter they were mixed, they were mixed Hispanic or black race. They were just people who had a message, and they played really good music, and that's all that really mattered. Mm-hmm. And I think in that regard, music is way ahead of the curve when it comes to that. So I'm not sure if how you guys feel about that, because I know, Martin, you mentioned about Grateful Dead. Jerry Garcia is a huge example of that, where his race wasn't even a factor. Richard, talking about punk rock music. I'm not sure what bands that stuck out for you that really had made an impact, where you really felt connected with what they were saying and their music. So I don't know if you guys want to share some your experiences with your love for music that you guys have grown up with, and how you feel about how people of color were featured in those music.
Well, for me, I mean, that's the thing that I love about music, is that, you're just listening. Right. You don't know what color these people are, right. It's just music, and it either attracts you or it doesn't, and, and there's, right now there's music that, like, new music to me is anything from 1990 to now. I just missed it all.
30 years of music, you're still behind.
Yeah,
yeah, same
like,
here.
Mm-hmm. Like, my friends make fun of me. I'm like, who is this, Rihanna? And they're like, oh my gosh, Rihanna is like,
yeah,
so long ago, and yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of, just listening. And I don't know. I don't have much more to say about that. I mean,
yeah, I agree with you too. What about for you, Rich? I mean, how's your connection with the music made you feel more connected with that?
Yeah, it's funny because when I got into alternative rock, what we now call alternative rock, back then it was just punk or hardcore, and I didn't think about the race of musicians, in part because right. Unless you bought the album and they had their face on the album cover, you have no idea,
right?
But for me, when I moved to California in the mid-90s to keep doing my graduate studies, I lived in Northern California for a couple of years, and I started to get into the Asian American scene there. I started to go to like independent Asian American films and listen to some, start to hear bands, and then like the spoken word scene in the early 2000s. In Minneapolis was largely Asian American and other communities of color coming in. And to me, that is when it started to really resonate, just the diversity of experiences playing out in the arts.
Right.
And I really love that, and I started to see how the diversity in art could really be used to also advance social justice issues.
Right.
That it's not just about, us getting paid what we deserve to get paid, but we're doing this and we're going to do it to advance our communities.
Yeah,
which is a very different thing than like Martin's critiquing, people who just want to make the money. Like, yeah, we might make money someday with this comic of ours, but I hope that in that process, right, we're not selling out our communities.
I see where you're going with this here. That's actually a very touchy thing. Well, the word, that phrase, selling out. I mean, it can be a very complex thing as far as how people perceive that, because I would think that I'm hoping that you guys do reach that level of success where you guys are able to have this comic book reach out to so many people with schools and whatnot, and really sharing a very powerful message with what you guys are trying to convey here. But when it comes to selling out, for yourself, and how you guys would feel about if you guys are able to reach that level of success, what's your mindset and preparing for in dealing with the the troubles and the things that would more than likely come along the way with a successful property, that people are going to want their hands on it, you know, to take a piece of that pie. I mean, how what's your guys' perception on that, and how you guys and want to handle that, assuming that will eventually come to that point?
Well, I've never in my entire adult life had a pie that people wanted. So I've never, you know, I mean, I was actually just having this conversation with my partner the other day. You know, my entire adult life, I've never made more than $40,000 a year. And I raised, you know, a family on that. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, if I was able to survive all that time on less than 40K, let's just say I double that, right? I'm going to feel really rich, you know, 40 to 80, like, holy shit, you know? And then like, then what do I want to do? Like, I want to set a threshold of like, once I make this much money, then the rest has to go somewhere. You know, what are the groups that I want to contribute to? Because I don't need a lot, you know, even if I just made 40, like I don't have a, you know, I don't have a child to take care of anymore. So that's just all me money, you know? And yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I'm wrestling with it. Rich tries to kind of keep me in balance. You know, I think that's why we work so well together. I mean, if he were not my brother, I'd be arguing with him all the time. You know,
do you really think that because just by default he's your brother, that you have that sense of respect for him, that, you know what, let me listen to that? I mean, I'm always curious when people.
I don't always listen to him. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, here are his opinions, and here are his suggestions.
I mean, like I think we know each other well enough that he knows when to push and when to not push. You know, and how to get me to listen, and maybe he'll phrase things in a different way. If it were anyone else, I would walk away. Like, I don't need to listen to that. I don't need to hear that from you, you know? But he'll send me something and ask me to rethink something, and I'll sit with it, and, you know, I'll stew for a little bit, and then I'll come back and I'll redraw it, you know?
So here's an example. We were talking about something, and I said, and I remember texting back, and I just said, don't do it for free. And because my take on this is not, oh, I just need to make 40,000 and I'm good. My take on it is we should be getting paid what we deserve.
Right.
And it should be commensurate to what others get paid who put in the same amount of effort and talent, right, and contribution.
Right.
And, you know, and you know, as an academic, you know, as a professor, I've done pretty well, right? And I have a lot of privilege and a lot of opportunities presented to me, and it would be very easy for me to sort of pull back and just sort of comfortably sort of coast through the rest of my career. But I appreciate having colleagues and graduate students and undergrad students who push me to keep me authentic, to that point made earlier, right? Like, so that I don't just sell out. Right? It's easy for me in a position of privilege right now to just sort of sell out. I could talk what I need to say to make, you know, people happy and to get my raises and whatever. But that wouldn't, I would be selling out, right? I'd be taking advantage of some privilege I have. And so I'm always being pushed by my students and by my colleagues to try to do better and do more. And, you know, if working with Martin on this comic can help me sort of stay authentic and help me sort of give back to the community and help put to words and image what people are feeling, then we should get paid for that, you know, and we should, and we can still be authentic and genuine in that way. Maybe Martin thinks differently.
No, I think that's the part that I am learning from Rich to try and do, you know, to become, because, you know, my entire life I've been doing things to please other people, you know? Because I have certain skills, like, oh, I can make that logo for you, you know, and I'll do it for $300, you know, whereas you just got quoted 5,000 for it, you know? I have the skills to do, I'll just do it for you, you know? And because it's part of who I am and how I defined myself, you know, through my adulthood, and I still carry that. So he is this constant reminder, like, don't do it for free. You are worth so much more than that.
Yeah.
But it falls back on that whole wanting to be accepted, that if I do it, you know, then they'll like me, they'll respect my work, and and then I'll get paid someday in the future, you know.
Yeah.
So my dad, let me tell you a story about our dad.
Okay.
So you know, our dad is an artist. That's where Martin gets it from, that side. And he was a layout artist for an advertising company for a long time. That was his first sort of job in this country. His boss helped sponsor his visa to get him, you know, to stay here.
Right.
And I was named after this guy. Right?
Okay.
My first name comes after this guy. And my dad landed a big contract with departments, you know, a local department store. And then after like 15 years or something, my dad just one day quit, and I didn't understand why. And years later, actually, just like 4 months ago or something, I asked him about that, and he explained to me why he quit. And he said, you know, I'd been working for this guy who basically I saw as like a big brother, and this white, you know, business owner. And he said, then I found out that they were paying a college student who just someone who just graduated college twice as much as what I was getting paid, to do half the work. And I was, you know, my dad had the biggest account, and so he quit out of, you know, when he recognized this racism, he quit, took his account to another company, and then years later the guy sort of came back and was like, I'll take you back and I'll pay you more. But it was like, my dad, you know, should he have just stayed because, well, he owes a debt to this guy who helped sponsor his visa, but he's getting paid half.
So when you mean by he owes a debt, are you talking about the fact that he did him a favor in helping your father stay here and getting the sponsor that he needed? So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a part of me that wonders, is that, do people think that way about, you know, let me just stick with you and be loyal to you because you've done me this favor? Is that, I always wonder if is that a cultural thing, or is that something that's just that's taught to you to think that way? Because I always have a question about people who share that kind of story. So I wasn't sure if you asked your father why if he felt that he needed to stay loyal to him at any point because of what he has done in the past.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly the answer my dad would give me on that. I didn't ask.
Oh, okay.
him. But I will say, I think the reason people would stay loyal in that situation is with the expectation that you're going to be treated well and compensated appropriately. And then to find out you're not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my parents were, you know, our parents were small business owners, and they treated their employees, you know, really well. I think as best they could, given that they were small business owners. Right. And, you know, they would buy them all their meals. They or give them generous gifts at the end of the year. And, you know, because they understood, like, look, you're working hard. We're going to do the best we can with what we have
to reward you.
Yeah.
For the hard work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's always a tough one for me, because I've heard that story many times before, where I've seen people that I've grown up with, that I've talked to about, where they have been working with somebody for a number of years and then realize that they've been taken advantage this entire time. But the person that was helping them and that had worked with them were so kind to them, inviting them over to their homes, get them Christmas gifts, whatever the case may be. But that for some reason, it didn't register with them to say, hey, you know what? I've been paying you X amount of money. I'm going to double that now, because you have been so good to me, and everything that I needed, you handled. And if I needed it done by a certain time, you not only did it on time, but you did it great. And that needs to be rewarded. So I'm going to compensate you for what I owe you and what you deserve, to show you that I appreciate what you've done. I don't understand why some people just can't do that. And I always wonder, is it really just because of race? I understand that. But I also wonder if a lot of it has to do with the racial aspect as well too, because a lot of
Right.
a lot of these stories I have heard are coming from people of color. Rarely do I ever hear a story where someone just was taken advantage of, and they were white. It's always, it's a little more complex with them. From most of the stories that I've heard, because their dad was here and and then they didn't like me, and so there's always some sort of like connective tissue where where the problem started. Here with with the stories that I've come across, and especially here in your father's story, that it has to do with their color. They've worked with them for a long, long time, and then never were appropriately compensated for the work that they've done, knowing full well that they've done a great job. And then when they left, then the person's starting to feel the consequences of, holy shit, I should have paid this guy a long time ago. Come on back. But it's too late. The damage has already been done. And I can forgive you, but you didn't give me the respect that I deserve. And what do you want from me now? Because I've already moved on. So like there's a part of me that has a big problem with that when I hear these stories. And the worst part about it too, I told this story with Lee as well, where I've seen that with my own community too, where there was someone that I worked with that told me we're getting paid X amount of money, but don't tell that guy because I told him we're getting paid X amount. And I was like, why don't you just give him the money that he deserves? I heard the guy's story. I talked with him. Yeah, I'm waiting for I'm helping to raise some more money so I can bring my wife and my kids over here. And it didn't even matter that we're not even from the same country. I just didn't understand why that was being done to our own people. That really, really bothered me. And then that person that I spoke with then told me, I'm still the same person that I was over 20 years ago. Well, obviously, you have not grown as a person because you're still stuck with that mindset. And clearly you have not evolved in becoming a better person. So, it's a problem for me when I hear these stories. And I mean, I'm not sure how, your father has felt about it now, given that so much time has passed with that. But, I don't know how you guys feel about that when you hear these stories, but especially if you hear it within your own community, because I know it has happened on more than one occasion. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that as well.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I mean, right before I moved here, I was having a chat with my son, and so my son works for some dear friends of ours, okay, and he's kind of like, he's 27 and trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life, and he's not quite sure if he wants to keep working there, right? And I'm like, well, and he feels like he should maybe, get a raise and this sort of thing, right? So I'm like, well, why don't you ask them for a raise? I just had dinner with them, and they told me that every single one of their employees has asked for a raise, right? He's like, well, they should know that I do good work. I'm like, they do know you do good work. He's like, then they should give me a raise. I'm like, they're not going to give you a raise unless you ask for one, And I just looked at him with tears in my eyes. I'm like, don't make the same mistakes that I made. Like, I just had dinner with them. They told me that all their employees ask for a raise. Go and ask for a raise. And he, and it broke my heart. Like, he learned this from me. He's like, I work hard. They should know.
Yeah.
And like, I mean,
but see, that's where it's the same thing in any industry where, even in academia, as faculty of color, we don't feel comfortable asking for what we deserve.
Yeah.
And what's helped me has been I have found other faculty of color who will tell me, here's how I negotiated this. Here's what I think you deserve, what you should ask for. And we rally around each other, right? Just like I bet there are many actors of color who do the same thing, where they try to help each other out. Like, look, when you're negotiating that role, ask for these writers, right? Get these things in writing, right? And that's the thing, is like, if we try to do this on our own, we'll always make missteps. We'll always, put ourselves in a situation where we're not getting what we deserve. And we need to work in solidarity with each other and others who are in our same communities, as broad as you want to define that community. Right. So that we get what we deserve. Right. And that's the kind of thing also I want to, is there a way we can get that communicated in the comic? Right. Because that's probably something that people have in their heads thought about, but haven't actually figured out how to put in words. You know?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I noticed with, you know, people of color in a lot of communities, the communication and learning how to express, you know, our thoughts and how we feel about certain things. We don't know how to really articulate all that very well. I know for a fact I didn't. I had a very hard time. Something as simple as saying no to a very simple situation where I could have just walked away from, but for some reason I had a very difficult time trying to communicate that to them because I was afraid that I would disappoint them, or you know, for a number of different reasons. And that's a very common thing that I've seen a lot with people of color.
Yeah, they call that the minority tax or the ethnic tax.
Right, I've heard that term
right?
before. Yeah, okay.
That's what they know that women, people of color, people who don't have the same, who are not in the majority, they know that we'll say yes to things. We'll take on extra service without compensation.
Yeah.
Because we are grateful that we're in this position. And of course, we want to help others, right? Because we know how hard it is to get here. But the system is set up to exploit that graciousness.
True. Yeah.
Right. And so how do you combat a system set up to exploit that your graciousness? That's where you need your community, right? You need the solidarity of people behind you to say, hey, you know, Rob, Martin, Rich, you know, don't get exploited. Don't just keep saying yes. Do something. You got to ask for more. You got to, you know, and sometimes you need that push to have the courage to ask, you know. So like Martin's son, you know, does he have that community of people beyond his dad? And if he doesn't, then, you know, that's how you exploit people. Right? You isolate them.
Yep. Yeah, it's a tactic that I've seen done on more than one occasion, but it's funny that how, you know, it's that thing has been going on for such a long time, and yet it hasn't really changed at all. Like I said, the system is always there, but I think the great thing about the way things are going now is that, you know, technology, in my opinion, I don't know how you guys feel about this, has really changed a lot. The internet, especially social media, you know, having all these different social media accounts, IG, I mean, Instagram, I have to say, Twitter, so on and so forth. And you're able to just expose things like that in a drop of a hat and point out these major flaws. And then you have something to use as a starting point to start this conversation. And I really think that's a very important tool that we never had before. You know, back in the 90s, early 2000s, that has changed tremendously in the last 10 years. Everything has, the communication has definitely, you know, has expanded for us, but we also have to filter out all the nonsense that comes out along the way, because there's different set of opinions within the community as well too that is not really understood or is misguided. And now we have to try to figure out how we can try to get everyone on the same page to, you know, resolve this issue that we have with this racism that we're still going through now. All different forms of racism, you know, which I think still does exist. So I'm not sure if you guys feel that, you know, with these tools that we have available here, does that also provide a sense of maybe a sense of hope for you to be able to find a way to reach out to people to communicate with? Because, you know, I know Pat followed you guys and then you had reached out to Pat, but, you know, you would have never done that if, you know, that had never happened. So obviously it has worked, and now, you know, now here we are talking as well too, as a result of all of that. So in my opinion, it has made a difference for me to hear these stories and hear from different perspectives. But I'm wondering for you guys how what your opinions on that, on how technology has really helped out a great deal to create that line of communication for everyone in these communities.
Well, I think that goes back to an earlier point when we were talking about having people of color represented in comics more, like, you know, in the movies, you know, with super and all that, is that we have this opportunity, especially with the comic that we're doing, to get certain messages out there and get it out faster, right? More accessible. And then people, you know, whether they bite on it or not, and then, you know, they look for more information, they want to learn, right? How we can keep that alive and keep it going, so that, I guess one of the concerns I have is, like, you know, having social justice issues and things that we're fighting for, one of my worries is that, like that we don't become like the people that we're fighting against, So an example is when I was teaching at this small school, and we got sick leave every year. We had X amount of personal leave days, right? And if you didn't use them at the end of the year, you would lose them, right? They wouldn't carry over. So I would watch all my white colleagues. I was one of maybe 2 people of color that worked at the school, but all my white colleagues would take sick days at the end of the year, and they would just not come to work because they had all these sick days. I had the same amount of sick days. I never missed work because I felt like I had an obligation to do my job, to be there for my students. So they would take their sick days, they'd get paid. The school would have to hire a substitute, pay even more wages, right? So at the end of the year, I said, why don't you just give me my sick leave, like in financial compensation? There's no legal obligation for them to do that. So of course they didn't, but I would never call in sick if I weren't sick. I would never take advantage of that system. Other jobs that I've had, people, they give their 2 weeks notice and then they call in sick for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
I mean,
I've seen that.
The job I just left, I gave them 2.5 months notice. I had 90 hours of sick leave. I didn't call in sick. I worked till the very end because that's my obligation as an employee, and my fear is that, I didn't want to become the exploiter. I've been exploited. I didn't want to become the exploiter. So I just kept working.
But for you, do you think having that work ethic, that set of values, do you think that it's something that you've learned from your family, or was that something they had instilled into you? Do you think that was where you had gotten that from, or is it just something you learned along the way and you figured out for yourself?
My parents. I mean, like Rich said, we never saw our family. Our parents worked. Leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, didn't come home till 8 o'clock at night. If that. And it was all like just doing the right thing. Just doing the right thing. That's what we were taught. And and I struggle with it. I did the right thing and I got screwed all along the way. I watched other people, my last year teaching, we were all on the same pay scale, and you got increments based on years of experience and this sort of thing. And the school was getting ready to hire a new administrator fresh out of college, and he said the wages are too low, and they were like, okay, we'll raise your wages. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I've been here for 16 years. I make less than $40,000 a year, and you're going to have him make more money than me? That's just wrong. Yeah. So I quit.
I mean, I've been teaching for 25 years in public universities, and students of color today are really smart and are very savvy. Many of them also really struggle with imposter syndrome and worrying that, maybe they're not good enough. Maybe they're going to get caught, and that is a symptom of a system that's failing, right? The educational system should not be one where all these students from immigrant first generation, right, college students, racial minorities, they should not be finishing college feeling like an imposter. And part of that is then the responsibility of professors and staff and, earlier educators in that student's life to provide them with the resources and the skills and the confidence to sort of just move forward. What I've seen is that imposter syndrome, everyone experiences that, whether you're a man or a woman, white, black. But if you're white and you experience imposter syndrome, you either have 100 people telling you you're not, right? Or you've got role models that you can see to show you that there's a path out of feeling like an imposter. And you've been told enough that you're smart and you can be successful, that you can talk yourself out of that anxiety and insecurity. But I think for many students of color who go through that same experience, they don't have those 100 people. They don't have those role models. They don't have all that sort of messaging given to them for how to sort of talk themselves out of that insecurity. And that's what we're trying to do, is really disrupt that inequitable system that we've all been raised in, right?
Yeah.
And again, not to sort of keep bringing this back, but if I can get some of that sort of thinking into a comic that kids are gonna read and find accessible,
yeah,
right, then we've done something good.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing. You know, even my two kids who are much younger, you know, they're 10 and 12, they read the comics sometimes that, you know, and they get it, you know, in a way that Martin and I, or you, maybe if we were 10 or 12, would never have gotten.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's the hope, is that we can be the ones who disrupt the system. There's enough, but that's going back to the point I made earlier, where we have to stay authentic and stay committed to our communities.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than sell out.
Right.
You know, and I'm reading Interior Chinatown, which is a really wonderful novel written by Charles Yu, but it's written as a screenplay. And it's about Asian Americans as actors, but also as characters. So you're reading the screenplay of them acting these stereotype roles as Asians, living in Chinatown.
Okay.
But it's all about the pressures of wanting to just sell out, to become the number one generic Asian man in a screenplay.
Right.
You know, and I'm reading that, I'm like, man, that is like everyday struggle of growing up as a person of color in this country.
Yeah.
You know, you were trying to just play the system rather than disrupt the system.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because, you know, we're talking about kids growing up being a person of color. My son, you know, I'm Hispanic. Both my parents are Nicaraguan. I was born here, here in the United States. My wife is Spaniard and half Peruvian. But when you look at her, she looks white because the Spaniard genes is clearly very strong in her. But when you look at my son, he looks nothing like an Hispanic. He looks Caucasian, blue eyes, brown hair, light skin. You know, and when he was telling his friends, you know, where he was from, you know, what his background was, none of them believed that he was Hispanic because he looked white. So, you know, there's a part of me that always wonders about those kids that look white, have you know, a mixed background, or have, you know, some sort of a POC lineage to some degree, but are able to cruise through because of their skin color. Where as soon as they mention their names, you know, my name is, you know, Roberto Gonzalez or whatever. You know, really, you look so white. And then there's that ignorance that comes out from that person who doesn't know any better. Maybe they just genuinely don't know, and that's just how they're approaching it. And that's very common too. So I think in some respects, you know, we got to be very cognizant of that, how we're going to, you know, speak to that person. And I hope that the person that is on that receiving end will be polite and educate them along the way. But there's always a part of me that wonders that my kid grows up, he's not going to see those struggles because he looks white. His name is pretty Anglican for the most part. His name is Angel. That's, you know, as white as he can get, and as Hispanic as he can get as well too. But he is also not going to see the same struggles that my mom, my dad, my stepfather, to some degrees myself, my brother, and my sister have all gone through, being Hispanic, where we looked Hispanic growing up, and now I don't look as Hispanic because I guess I've cleared up because I stay away from the sun off now. But there's a part of me that wonders what's he going to experience growing up as a kid who doesn't look like a person of color, even though he is a person of color. There's always that unique story of a
Mm-hmm.
person going through that. So I don't know if you guys have ever come across people that have been in that kind of a situation where their skin color has never really been a factor, but they've been able to not experience the same struggles that you guys have, and hearing their perspective and how they've been dealing with, their personal experiences in a situation like that, where they stuck out because, they don't look like their ethnic background by any means. I don't know if you guys have any stories that you guys have learned from people of that kind of background.
Well, I got a message from one of the followers on Instagram, and they were talking about how their son is quote unquote white passing,
Right.
and was in school, and whatever the subject was that they were talking about, something about race. And I think the teacher asked, like, is there anyone here that can tell a story or something like that about race? And he didn't raise his hand because he didn't want anyone to know that he was a person of color, because all his friends thought he was white, and
Mm-hmm.
what the mom was expressing was like, like, why would he not say who he is?
Right.
And how much that pained her,
Mm-hmm.
I know for my son, my son's half white and half Korean. As a single dad, I raised him, and so all his friends, I was trying to explain to him, I'm like, you're half white, but like, none of your friends have seen your mom. They've only seen me.
Right.
So like, people see you as a person of color. You may not feel like you're a person of color, but you are, and yeah, I think Rich can speak to the whole white passing thing better than I can, but for me to see it in my own child and recognizing that,
Mm-hmm.
And the same as me, like, as 100% Korean, I tried so hard not to be Korean.
Yeah.
And
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I get this second chance with the comic.
Well, I know, Rich, you're going to be heading out shortly here. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to close out with your thoughts on what the question here.
Yeah, we actually are studying this exact issue in some of our research, looking at how Asian Americans in interracial relationships are raising their multiracial kids.
Right.
And the issue of white passing comes up, and one of the things I think that is a real challenge for parents is how much is it, how well and how much are you raising your child to develop a positive, strong ethnic and racial identity, so that in that situation, in a classroom or in any other situation where they could pass, they're able to stand up and verbally say, right, with confidence and without feeling ashamed, right, yeah, I got something to say about race or racism, or I could talk about this. And I think what's hard is that a lot of parents, we've found, if their child is white passing, they'll put in less effort on racially socializing that child than they will on a child who they know, because of their phenotype, is more likely to get discriminated. They'll put in more effort for that kid than their other kid.
Yeah.
And so part of it is like, it's on the parents, really, like how much effort did we put in to have these conversations? Martin and I've had this conversation, like the way I'm raising my two boys, who, my wife is also Korean American, the way we raised those kids, when they were early at a young age, they were able to call out kids for racism and sexism. That Martin and I growing up, and perhaps you, Rob, would never have been able to do. Yeah. We never had that vocabulary. We didn't have what we call racial literacy.
Yeah.
We couldn't put into words the things that my kids can say, now.
Right.
But my wife and I, every day we talk about these things with them. It's not like in an awkward way. We just bring it up because it's a natural part of our existence to talk about culture and race and ethnicity. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the comic, is like, you read a comic every day. Reading about race, ethnicity, gender, sexism, LGBT issues, that should just be something you're reading about every day, and not like, wow, this is a special thing we're reading. You know, and I think that's it. We're trying to make something that's not special. We're trying to make something that's common and everyday.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so that they're not the other ones, that they're actually the ones you see every day. Just like you saw the other Peanut characters.
Yeah.
That's what we want, I would say. I don't know if that's how you would put that, Martin.
Yeah, exactly what he said.
I have to go though, because
Yeah.
I got to go bring my kid to baseball. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Rich, and taking the time to do this here, and I did enjoy the conversation and a lot of the insight you have provided here. So I'll also be sure to point out all the social media links in the description below, so everyone can look into following you guys as well. Is there anything that you want to say before you leave, as far as a closing message is concerned, with anything that we got into here that you think needs to be brought up again?
No, I feel like you did a great job just pulling things from us. You know, I've just really appreciated being able to have an opportunity to reconnect with my brother in a very different way, in an adult way.
Yeah.
Where we're siblings, but you know, in some ways we're co-conspirating, you know, to try to change
the system.
Change the system, or change the way, you know, the next generation is going to live their lives.
Change the world, really.
Know? So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, no, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Well, like I said, I think, you know, I just had some friends who were into the Dead, you know, high school years, and then just started listening to them, and the music made sense to me. I went to my first Dead show, and
what year was this when you went?
87, maybe.
Oh, so this is like at the height of their career, because that's when they released that song.
That's when they came out with Touch of Grey, I think 88, somewhere around there.
Yeah, around there. So you were actually at that point when they were really peaking that popularity. Correct. Later in their career.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then, you know, because I was just, you know, I graduated high school in 85, so maybe 86, somewhere around there, high school years.
Okay.
And, you know, went to my first Dead show, and the community spoke to me. You know, that was 85, 86 was not a great time for me.
Okay.
You know, like Rich said, I had gone to college and I had dropped out, and like I had told Kat, you know, I was going through some issues, and I, you know, tried to commit suicide, you know, and it was through that. So anyways, you know, at that same time, you know, I'm discovering the Dead. I go to a Dead show, and the community is kind of like with Rich and his punk rock. It was a group of misfits, you know, people, you know, there's a great Grateful Dead sticker, you know, not all who wander are lost, you know, and these are the same people, you know, they're like me. We're all trying to find something, and this sense of brotherhood and sisterhood. And that spoke to me, you know, especially because, you know, when I had tried to kill myself, I was 18. And because I was technically an adult, they could not put me in the children's ward at the psychiatric hospital because the adult ward was full. And the only way they could get me into the children's ward was if I signed a waiver, which I did because I was kind of in this whatever.
What was a waiver for exactly? What is it that you're actually signing away for?
I guess to be able to be in the children's ward, in the 18 and under ward. I don't remember how it worked, but basically they put me in that ward, and I had to sign something because I was technically an adult.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm in there. I'm in the hospital for 2 weeks, and you know, going through my own issues. And there's this 12-year-old girl who I come to find out has been in and out of this hospital basically her entire life. You know, she's 12. And from age 2 to 12, she'd been sexually abused pretty much every day of her life. You know, and here I am, I'm 18, and this is a child, you know? And it dawned on me, like, you know, like, Martin, whatever shit you're going through, you're not going through this. This kid has it so much worse than you. Like, what are you complaining about, really? You know, your life is golden compared to this child. And so when I got out, I wanted to become a teacher. I did not want any child to suffer the way this child did. So that's what led me down to the path of teaching. You know, I've now just come to realize that my path was not to become a teacher. My path was to right wrongs, was social justice, like seeing things in the world that are just not right and wanting them to be better. So that's what drives the comics. You know, when, like I told Pat, when you read the comics, you'll see some pretty angry ones. Mm-hmm. Those are mine, where I don't even text Rich. You know, I just make those on my own. And the ones that are a little bit more sophisticated, those are his ideas, you know, and then I just draw them. And so anyways, with the Grateful Dead, that became my community, you know, and it you know, and so I think because I didn't have that, I didn't have the family connection that I wanted as a child growing up in white America. I would see all my friends' parents at all our games, Little League, football. My parents were never there. You know, I would see all my friends' parents tell them that they love them every day. My parents never did that. You know, even when I was in the hospital, I said, you know, you never said I love you. You know, and they looked at me and they're just like, it's just understood.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I carried that, like, and so when I found the Dead, that became family, you know, and so you know, it's still part of me because that was my first idea of what family should be like, or what I wanted to be like, you know, so
it does answer my question. It actually brings me to a point that I had a conversation with Glenn, who works with us here on the channel. When I was on his podcast, I was talking about, you know, my introduction to movies and how I where my passion and my obsession came from that, because one of the things that I took away the most from movies was the set of values that I still carry to this day that I've gotten from films that I did not get from home. I mean, there were some values that my parents try to instill that seem a little like, you know, oh, you're just saying it because you have to, you know, but and then along the way I've learned some things that I'm like, all right, well, I see where you're coming from now. I see, you know, why you did it this way. Don't agree with it, but I get it. Oh, yeah. But the set of values that I've learned from movies, I took from them I took to whole heart, because it always came from a very good spot. Like Rocky's the biggest example of that. I mean, you see the shirt that I'm wearing, but you know, the character is very authentic. He's a very flawed character. He knows that, and he knows that, you know, he has no shot in life. And then here he is, able to overcome these things. And all he really wants is to show that he can hang with the best. That's really the bottom line. I want to be able to show that I can hang with the best. And I want the guy to be able to acknowledge that. And then we do get that acknowledgement in Rocky 2 when he's like, hey, Apollo, did you give it 100%? He's like, yeah, I did. He's like, thanks. That's all he wanted. So now he feels fulfilled, and now he's got to go and live his life. You know, despite the fact that the character is white, but the struggle that the character goes through, any person of color can go through that. And I always took a lot of those life lessons from that character, because they spoke to me. Because, you know, when he messes up, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. My parents never did that. You know, a lot of my own friends never really admitted to those things to me. And it wasn't until I got into a community with people that I have the same interests with them, I realized that the same set of values that I've gotten from television, they got it from the two. And then there's a sense of community that I developed from. And then later on, as the years have gone by, working with NRW, it just so happened that there are people of color that have the exact same experiences too, whether it be from comic books, music, whatever the case may be. We all have the same story in varying ways, but we have that sense of community that we know where we're coming from. We get, you know, the struggle, and we're here to send the message that we're going to try to change the system. You know, Pat and I, we talked on many occasions that we want this channel to grow. The problem is that this market is oversaturated, because if we'd done this over 10 years ago, we probably would have been well off and get to a point where we are successful with that. But I look at it as, you know, that's even better for us, because now we can prove that we can still overcome this oversaturated market and still be successful. It'll be a lot of hard work, but we can pull it off. That to me is the inspirational story. that we're in this rubble of a mess of different channels, but we're going to come out through it regardless. I still believe that we can still pull it off. And we've been seeing the numbers progress along the way. And I'm very happy with that. More content is being created, and a different approach and unique perspective from each of us and how we want to approach it. And Pat has his Show Pal show on the channel, providing a voice for the Filipino community, but also from different variants of people who are mixed as well too, hearing their stories as well too, which I think is wonderful. I'm more in the perspective, like, I want to talk to everybody from all different perspectives. Don't matter what color you are. I want to hear your story. If it's interesting, I want to hear it, because there's something about getting a perspective from people's point of views, from different variations of their careers that they have with music, films, or whatever the case may be. And then you hear the stories that most people don't really care for, that I think is very valuable, that you can take the most from. Which is why when Pat said, you got to talk to these guys, I was like, I will love to talk to them, because I think their story is absolutely unique. The fact that you started doing this later in life, which most people say, you're doing this now in your 50s, isn't that a little too late? I think that's even better, because now you figured out something that you going through your own personal struggle. You hear, you're figuring out what you want to do. Now you get to share that message. For the kid that, would probably figure out the same lesson in life in their 50s, they can figure it out now, because now you've experienced that. You can share that message. Hey, do this now while you still can, while you still are able to do it. Take advantage of the system. Take advantage of this situation that you're in, and go for it. Don't be scared to mess up, because you're going to fuck up regardless. That's part of the life lesson.
Well, that's why I'm so excited that, when you contacted me, because I've spent over 50 years of my life trying not to be a person of color.
Right.
And through the comics, being able to tell my story, like, there's a little bit of me in each and every one of those characters.
Right.
And to share, like, in their facial expressions, like, this is the pain that I am going through. Like, I'm telling my story. Yeah, some of them are Rich's words, or his content, but, like, in the drawing of, like, what their eyebrows are doing, and are they making a fist? Like, that's how I'm feeling.
Right.
And wanting to, like, to be able to say, yeah, I'm a nerd of color.
Yeah.
This is who I am, and and I'm happy with who I am. Like you said, like, growing up through our childhood, like, maybe I wouldn't have raised my kids that way or whatever,
Yeah.
But now you appreciate, like, had I not been raised the way I was raised, I would not be where I am today. I had to go through all those struggles. All that stuff had to happen, in order for me to be here right now doing what I'm doing. I had to go through all that pain. I just don't want other people to have to go through, like, there has to be an easier way. There has to be, and like, his kids are so much more aware.
Yeah.
This generation coming up, they have the words, they have the tools, and that's what gives me hope, is that, that this is not just a flash in the pan, that we will see the Black Superman, and we will see, all the, that's, and, and they are written by people of color, and that becomes the new norm, and, I think the resistance that our community is feeling right now is because, I think white America realizes that in 20 years, they're not going to be the majority anymore, and this sense of fear that's overcoming them, and they're reacting, and, and what kind of future do we want for our children? And I think, through your show and Pat's show and through the comics, that we have a way of spreading this message out that was not accessible to us when we were kids.
No.
I had Hojan from MASH as the only person of color to look to, and he was only on for one season, and, so it was like, wanting to, just make the world better. And this is the only way that I know how, because these are my passions.
Yeah. And it's funny because you're talking about Hojan from MASH. When I was a kid, to this day, my favorite actor of all time is still Sylvester Stallone. I think he's a fantastic actor, but a lot of it stems from what I've seen in the past that he's done. And then, people will have an opinion about him, but the fact of the matter is that the genre that he has helped develop and help expand really spoke to me because of the struggle of the everyday man. But then, it never occurred to me that, he was white. Why aren't there any Hispanics or people of color? Because I've seen Wesley Snipes movie, and I just thought, oh, it's another action hero. It never occurred to me that he was black. It was just Wesley Snipes in an action movie. But then the one movie that really made the difference for me, where I realized, oh, you can do this here, it was the movie El Mariachi, which is directed by Robert Rodriguez, which is part of the Mexico trilogy. When I was a kid, I saw that movie and I realized, oh, you can, the whole film is done in Spanish. So I'm watching the film and I'm realizing, oh, so you can do this, with a Mexican, a Mexican character going through a struggle and being told in Spanish from start to finish. There is no, white character that's coming in to kind of help, massage the situation to allow people of white people to enjoy the film too. It's just all done with a Hispanic cast, with the exception of one character who I think was a villain who was actually white, who didn't speak Spanish. He did everything phonetically, which I learned later on. But the point I'm getting at is that when I saw that movie, I realized, oh, you can do this with Hispanic characters. That always stuck out for me. And then when I saw Desperado, which is all done in English, of course, but the majority of the cast are all Hispanic. And that really spoke to me because I realized, oh, so you can do this for real in the Hollywood system, although the film was very low budget, $7 million, but it was a very successful film. And I realized, oh, so there is an opportunity for people of color to do this here. And the fact that Robert Rodriguez, who I guess you could consider having the Hispanic work ethic, if you will, where do it on your own, find a way to make it work, patch everything together. And when you learn how he does his movies, you're like, holy shit, that's exactly what I've seen within my community, but he's doing that with the Hollywood system now. That was really, really inspirational for me. And that's when I realized, oh, so there is something wrong with the system. And I learned that at a very early age. And then I come to find out too, that there are a lot of actors who are of Hispanic background that are in movies, but their skin color or their heritage wasn't really the factor in the movie. Like Raul Julia is one of the best examples of that, where he played a German villain in a Clint Eastwood movie. I forgot the name of the movie. It was him and Charlie Sheen. Mm-hmm. He's Puerto Rican, but he's playing a German character. I was blown away with that. And in Street Fighter, most people hate that movie. I love it, but he is the best part of the entire movie. He's playing like I guess a British villain, if you will, because he has a British accent. Like it surprised me that people of color can do this, and it didn't matter they were Hispanic. It was just that they were a good actor playing a part of a different ethnicity. And when I saw that as a kid, it really stemmed from watching El Mariachi as a kid, and then seeing that and being exposed to it, then I became more aware of that. That really changed the landscape for me about how films were being done. And then slowly, as time has gone by, you get that one landmark film of a certain group of people that stick out, but yet it never caught on. Like the Joy Luck Club, the debut, El Mariachi. Like you see these movies that were successful and then has stuck out, and we're like, wow, you can do this with these people. But for whatever reason, it never caught on. It took a long time to get to this point, which there's a part of me that's kind of, upset about it, because like you guys could have done this 15, 20 years ago, and you're just now realizing that you could do this here, but at the same time, I'm thinking that's great, but I'm also skeptical. Are they doing it for the right reasons? Is it really coming from a genuine spot? So, I mean, we kind of touched upon this before, but I wanted to highlight more about this here too. That I think is really important.
Well, back then, I mean, everything was whitewashed, and so, there was this token this and the token that, and, there were no people to look up to, really, and, so again, I think like with the Rocky movies, they're inspirational, yes. I find inspiration in whatever I can find, so when growing up, I would just take whatever I could get my hands on and try to make it my own, because it's all I had, whereas my friends had the whole world, available to them. And I think now with, like hip hop and rap becoming, dominant forms of music, and like everyone's listening to it, right? And not people, you know, are the youth of today are not seeing color the way that we saw color, you know, that are our generation, you know, much more accepting, you know, and so yeah, it gives me hope. I'm pretty skeptical.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat too. I really am.
You know, but you know, right now, I feel like we are on this, I guess, precipice of like where it can go, you know, and how that we have to keep our voices active and we have to empower other people, you know. And I think that's the thing that I've been appreciating about the comics and getting comments from people is that, you know, thank you for putting a voice to what I've been feeling, and you know, all these different things, you know, like that I'm hoping that it's not just I don't even know the right phrases, a one-trick pony, you know. That there's going to be more. And I think by rallying people around us and by making the comic daily, you know, because like I told Pat, it originally was going to be just once a week, and you know, but now having it as a daily, and that it's part of everyone's every day, you know, always there, and it's not going to go away, you know. And I think, you know, having shows like yours, that we're not going to be silenced anymore, that we're going to keep speaking, and we're going to keep taking to the streets, and we're going to keep doing all the things that we're here, and our voices are, and when we should be celebrated and not meant, not, I don't want children to feel like I'm not Black, I'm not, you know, I'm not Korean. No, you are Korean, you are Black, you are Hispanic, you are who you are, and it's okay who you are. You know, and we should celebrate that. And that's what makes, you know, that's what I always thought was, you know, supposed to make America great, you know. And so,
you know, it's funny because I remember when I was a kid, you know, I was never really, I mean, to be frank, even now, I'm not really that into politics. I know enough for me to understand what's going on and seeing the trajectory of where things are going. But when I was a kid, I just had a conversation, literally, I think yesterday. I was because my family are Nicaraguans, and I was actually over Nicaragua when I don't know if you're familiar with the Nicaraguan politics, you know, with Daniel Ortega, the Sandinistas, you know, one of the greatest bands of all time. I don't know how I've listened to the record before. I was kind of mixed about it because I didn't think the songs were all that great. Some of them were, some were not. The Clash did an album called Sandinistas, which was heavily inspired by the Sandinista movements when they were trying to gain back the government from the dictatorship under Somoza. But then, you know, my father, you know, was there during that period. Him and my mother grew up under that dictatorship under Somoza. And, you know, then the Sandinista came in to try, you know, take back the government. And then it became what it became. You know, I wasn't very pleased with it. Neither was my father. But my father, in a lot of ways, was very involved with that, him and his brothers, because they were forced to, you know, go into the military under the Sandinista government. But what I'm trying to point out is that when I was a kid, I went to Nicaragua, and you know, they had you know, there was a different president at the time under a different political party, and Daniel Ortega is now coming back to try to take back the government. Well, in a lot of ways, I look back at it now, this reminded me so much of what we've experienced now here with the Trump you know, era here, where I didn't think twice about it. I just thought, no, America's not like that, because I seen people are just shouting shit at each other, throwing shit at each other. You know, you are against the, you know, I was blown away as a little kid seeing that. I was like, holy shit. So good thing America's not like that, because I wasn't really that invested with the government. I just only saw from afar. Whatever I saw on TV, that was the extent of my knowledge. But seeing that, you know, right in front of my eyes, and having relatives who are strong Sandinista supporters, and I have relatives now who are not Sandinista supporters, and seeing the clashes of the two set of values in the political system. And I was just like in awe, I meant to say, about, holy shit, this is amazing. I can't believe I'm seeing this as a kid. And I was exposed to all that. Seeing that now in 2016 and seeing how things unfolded, it reminded me so much of that time when I was in Nicaragua. I was like, I've seen this before. And I've seen what this guy's doing, where he's telling people what they want them to hear. It's not a very uncommon thing, but Trump did it differently, where he was just basically pulled the veil and said, "This is all corrupt, and I'm going to change this system." But instead, he just pretty much added to the same scenario. He didn't make any difference. So how many people they say that he did it. But the point I'm getting is that as I'm seeing all this here, you know, the same the system, the problem about government that I had with Trump, now that I'm more invested with it more, but not as much, but I'm still more invested than I was before. You know, the the system has been exposed, but the problem is still there. You see where I'm getting at? And race has been an issue. It's been a talking point, because now you can point at the problem, and the problem is the Mexican, it's the Chinese, it's the Asians, and then more and more it's become exposed to how corrupt the system, which we all knew has been corrupt, but we have cameras now that expose that. But the people that are responsible for that act are either still getting away with it, which exposes that the system is even more corrupt than we initially thought, which we all knew it was, but most people didn't know. Now we're aware of it. And you can see where how the system has now been, being at a flaws that it is. It's scary, because we all knew this, and now that we've exposing it, or it hasn't been exposed, and we're commenting on it, we're talking about it. My biggest problem with it now, and I don't know how you feel about it too, is that there are a lot of uneducated people from all walks of life who are now chiming in, because everyone now has an opinion, but they don't have any knowledge on the matter. They don't really know what's going on. They don't really know what's the biggest issue that we have to deal with. And that's that the people that are running this system are have always been corrupt, but they don't want to let go of that power. They want to maintain that. It may sound like I'm being like this whole conspiracy theorist. I don't believe that I am. I don't think I am. I don't think I ever will be. But it's kind of obvious that who's in charge and who wants to stay in charge, and the people that are willing to keep them in charge. It's very obvious. It's right in front of you guys. And somehow people are too stupid to realize that. And the people that are chiming in to change that aren't really educated on how to approach it, how to change it, how to disrupt that system. There's a way to go about it. I don't know what the answer is, but I think there are people out there that are trying to educate the public to look out for these flaws, and to find a solution to the matter. It's not always going to be an immediate, fixer upper that's going to happen overnight, and that's what Trump was promising. And look what happened. It hasn't worked. The problem's still there. So, I'm kind of ranting on about it, because this is something that I've kind of held inside for quite some time, but I was hoping I can talk with you about it, because I feel like you and I have the same, opinion on the matter. I kind of felt that from the very beginning when we were conversing. So I'm hoping that you could, share, what you think about that. And maybe, I don't think you're going to have an answer, but I think you would have at least a attempt to a solution to the problem with this comic book being the voice. You mentioned about how you want to put new content every day. You put something that was extremely, extremely important. Emmett Till. He would have been 80 today on July 25th. That is something that, is overlooked. And people bring it up all the time. But, to do it in this medium, in this comic, that I think looks very innocent, but it has a very dark history, for someone who says, who is Emmett Till? That has already piqued their interest. You see where I'm getting at?
Yeah.
That's all we need to do. Use that medium to express that, to show, to educate the person. Who is he? What happened? And then when you learn about it, holy shit. Because when I learned about it as a kid, I was like, wow, this is terrible. This is disgusting. And it's a very disgusting piece of American history, but it is American history, unfortunately. And we need to talk about that. We need to educate people about that. But what's the solution to that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so yesterday morning, I'm sitting on the beach and Rich sends me a text.
Yeah.
And it says, Emmett Till would have turned 80 today. I was like, I'll make a comic when I get home. So got home late, and it's like I usually do. He sends me something and I do a Google search and just try and get my bearings, right? And I'm just thinking of, okay, how am I going to present this? How am I going to present this? What are the words that I'm going to use? How am I going to phrase this whole, like, there's so much there. Like, I'm like, how am I going to do this in one panel? Right. And so I'm just thinking, and I'm just like, It's just Emmett Till would have turned 80 today. That's it. That's all I need to say. And those who want to know will do a Google search, and one little Google search will lead you down this rabbit hole. And you just click the first thing and you're just going to be in tears. You know, like you're going to learn something. And I think I want to give power back to the people. We are the 99%. You know, I feel like every comic I make is trying to speak to that, you know, from the comic saying, you know, like, why are essential workers paid hourly? That makes no sense to me. If we're so essential, put us on salary. You know, white collar jobs, those should be hourly, because, you know, like, you know, the people during the pandemic, you know, like it's all lip service. And so giving voice to those who don't have a voice, you know, teaching our children that there's another way, and using comics as that medium. And yeah, I have lots of frustration over everything that's been happening, you know, and thankfully Rich, as my collaborator, brings that balance to me, because otherwise the comics would not be as successful as they are if it weren't for his input, you know, because I would just rant and rave and people would just be like, oh my God, that's just so angry. I can't read anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so he brings this nice balance to me and kind of keeps me grounded. But at the same time, I think I kind of feed his fire, you know, like, you need to stoke your fire a little bit. Like, you should be more angry than you are, you know? And so, yeah, because he's my brother, we can have that conversation, or he can poke me and I can poke him back, you know, or even just through a simple emoji, you know, he gets what I'm saying just from that emoji, you know, because we grew up and we have this language, you know? So, you know, I don't have the answer. I think the closest I have is that we as adults need to keep showing the next generation.
Starting the conversations, I think, is kind of like the best way to go about it.
Yeah, having the conversations, and through our actions, through the things that we do, the way that we behave around people, the way that, you know, when I was teaching, I would tell parents, I'm like, you know, children can sense things that we as adults kind of forget. So like, two parents in the hallway, maybe they had a fight about something, you know, something stupid, right? And they're not talking to each other. They don't have to say anything. Just their body language alone sends a message to their child. Their children pick up on those things. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously. And that's what they learn, you know? So through everything that we do, they're watching us, you know? That's what they learn, you know? And so we have to be even more careful with our words and our actions, because, you know, if you don't want to have issues down the line, I mean, all those old sayings, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and this, that, and the other, you know, like, they're all true for a reason, right? That's why people keep saying them, you know? You need to look a little bit deeper, and like, what is that hidden message, you know? And, you know, to be able to, you know, craft our daily lessons for our kids and for our society of like, look a little bit deeper, look a little bit deeper. So like, that's why the comics don't have all this information, you know? It's like a little snippet, you know? And now you do the work, you know? I'm opening a small door for you. Whether you choose to walk down, you know, open it or not, that's up to you, you know? But it's there.
You know, and that's the thing too with media, because, you know, the media is a very, very powerful. I mean, we all know this, you know, with you put in, you know, an image and everyone's like, oh my God, you know, they react to it, and however they react, it will vary. But, you know, it's a very powerful tool. You know, when like, for example, I'm going to use Black Panther as an example. You know, when Black Panther came out, the general consensus was, this is a great film. This should have come out 25 years ago, and this would have changed everything. You know, whether or not you know, if it would have had the same impact as it had today. But I think that, you know, taking a character like this and giving it the respect and creating the spectacle to showcase that, you know, this is a very important time where we can tell this story of a person of color that is not only integral in the Marvel universe, but really integral in society in general, because there's a very powerful story you can tell with this character. and we've seen it before with Superman, but can we tell it with a black character? Yes, we can. And you can tell a very successful one at that. And certainly Black Panther proved it, in my opinion. When I look at entertainment, there's a lot of things that I take away from, because we talked earlier about music. I think music is one of the most important tools that we have to communicate. And a lot of times when I come across these artists that I've come to admire and respect, and in a lot of ways kind of idolize. I don't idolize a lot of people, but I use that loosely. But what I'm trying to get is that I realize the most impactful individuals that made a music that has appealed to the audience most of the time are really people of color. They have the most impact. Freddie Mercury is one of the, in my opinion, is one of the greatest singers and one of the greatest frontmen of all time. Like bar none, I think he is the cream of the crop. If you are trying to achieve that, you're probably going to fail miserably, because he has set the standard, and I don't think many people will ever achieve that. And there's never been someone like that ever since, to really have that impact. But he is Indian. He is Asian. He is a person of color. Did it matter? No. But the fact that someone of color and someone of color who's gay at that matter, it shows you that it doesn't really matter who you are, and it really doesn't matter who the person, what the person's background is. But if you're really going to use that as a way to make a point, look at Freddie Mercury, who's in one of the greatest bands of all time, one of the greatest singers of all time, and who has one of the most legendary status that most people are trying to copy and emulate, and will never achieve that level of success, if you will, in that particular capacity. He's a gay man who happens to be Indian. You see what I'm getting at? But music.
See, that's the thing. People never talk about that, though.
Right.
Right. They just talk about Queen, and nobody ever makes mention of those things. And I think that's the part that is missing, is that those things need to be brought to the forefront.
I agree too.
He is a person of color. He is gay. Like you think about like Elton John and flamboyant as can be, but they never talked about it. And like they should have talked about it.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, in his, at the height of his career, And I think that those are the things that are now starting to happen. With people like Demi Lovato speaking out, and they're making their voices known, because they have this platform. And I think that's the change that I would like to see, is that those people in power are using, like Spider-Man, like using their powers and doing the most responsible thing that they can with the power that they have. They have a platform, and use it to change the world, not just to money, like I'm a firm believer, like if you do that's what I taught my kids, if you do the right thing, the money will come, things will happen because you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I may not be the best example because the money didn't come, but
but here's the thing though. You talk about, I tried the right thing and didn't, but you did it in here's what I picked up from it. And you let me know if you think I'm wrong. You did the right thing, and you stuck by the rules, and obviously in your opinion, you said it didn't pay off because now you were overlooked, and people had, in a lot of ways kind of, I guess, in a way dismissed, your contribution. But now you decided to walk away from that, and you said, you know what, fuck, I'm going to do what I've always wanted to do. And I should have done this a long time ago, but right now I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make an impact the way that I want to do it. And I think that that's a part of the lesson that you've learned. And I'm not people have their opinion about how this here, but I'm not a believer of things happen for a reason. I am a believer that you have to make things happen, and you have to give it a reason for it to happen.
Right.
So, you followed those set of rules, and it didn't pay off. Now you decided to follow your own set of rules, and you decided to follow your own passion. And that's where the impact has come. Now you're talking to people that you probably would have never talked to before if you hadn't made those choices, if you hadn't made that decision. So yeah, you can look at it both ways. If I follow this, and maybe I'm not the best example, but I think you are a good example in that I am a person, and I don't know how you feel about this here, but I'm a person that you don't need to be an example for anybody. You have to be a good example for yourself, and everyone else that will look at that will follow through.
It's funny. Once I started the comic, I realized what I was doing. So my entire adult life, I would tell children or anyone who asked me, so if you want to be happy, find the 2 things that you are passionate about. Doesn't matter what they are. The 2 things that you are most passionate about, and put them together and do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, social justice, I'm passionate about that.
Right.
And making comics, that's what all I did my entire childhood. And then when I became an adult, I stopped doing those things.
Yeah.
You know, I thought teaching was it. And I thought, you know, being a graphic designer and this, you know, like they're all kind of related, but I didn't even take my own advice until I made that first comic and I put those 2 things together. And the minute I did, holy shit, the world opened up. I was like, what, you know, a weight was released off my shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm at peace. Like, you know, and, you know, you're talking about Trump exposing, you know, the corruption in government. I think what happened during that time period was that the veil was lifted on all the corruption, you know, that, you know, the people in power, you know, and you're, you know, it's like when you see all these memes about, you know, Bezos's penis shaped rocket, blah, blah, blah. And I hope he stays up there. And like all the, you know, all this shit, because people are seeing, you know, the veil has been lifted, you know, and everyone is seeing it because of the internet, because of the way our society is now. You can't help but see it, right? And so now that it's been exposed, now we need to rally the 99%, you know, and that's where the change is going to happen, you know, because, you know, I haven't taught in a number of years, but back then 99 was greater than 1, right? So that's where the power lies, you know, and we just need to mobilize everyone, and people just need to, you know, 'cause I believe, you know, deep down people they're good, you know, but they've just been taken advantage of and pushed down. So then like, once they get a little bit of power, they forget and they just like become like everyone else, you know? People only know what they know. Like they've been taught, right?
Right.
And so, you know, if you look at my website, there's a quote at the bottom that says, from Charles Schultz.
Yeah.
I love mankind. It's people I can't stand.
Right. I remember,
you know, and for me, what that means is that, you know, when we're born, there's so much potential.
Yeah.
Right. And so as a teacher, you know, the root of education for me was like, you know, the root word from education is educe. Like it's my job to draw forth from this child all the potential that lies within that child. Right. How I do that is up to me, you know, as a teacher, but there's so much potential in all of us, and how we teach them is what they're going to learn, right? And who they're going to become. So even, you know, the most racist 90-year-old, right? I still believe that there's potential in there, right? It's going to take a lot of work because it's 90 years worth of shit that's been built up, you know, just like for me, it's over 50 years worth of shit that I've been dealing with, you know?
Right.
I'm still coming to grips with all that. I'm still learning. Like there's, you know, I make these comics and there's like stuff in there that I don't even know about. You know, Rich sends me a text and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, I've never heard of this before, you know? And so I think we all have this opportunity where we can teach people, where we can learn. And it's not going to happen overnight because like you said, we have this system set up that is so ingrained in our culture. You know, it's like, you know, I don't know if you've ever smoked, you know, but
you talking about cigarettes or
cigarette smoker?
Very little.
But you know, people who have smoked, it's really hard to quit.
Yeah.
You know, or people who are alcoholics. It's like you have these habits, things that you've been doing every day, you know, and if you've grown up in a racist household or you've been surrounded by people, you know, that's all you know. And until you have this awakening, you know, I heard this, I think it was a Radio Lab one time, and they were talking about, again, you only know what you know, right? And they were talking about this girl who went to college, and she's sitting around the dorm, and all her friends are like, oh my God, the food in the cafeteria is horrible, blah, 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 blah. And they're all complaining. And she's just like, what are you talking about? There's so much selection. And they're like, what? And she goes home and she's like, Mom, why did you feed me chicken every night for dinner? Right? Her entire life, her mother made her chicken.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, because you like chicken. You know, so in her mind, she thought that's the only meal you ever eat for dinner,
Right.
that there's no other option.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she didn't know any better. This is an adult, you know? She's not an idiot, but she didn't never questioned it.
Yeah.
You know, people who think unicorns are real because no one ever told them they weren't.
Yeah.
You know,
Like Santa,
so,
pretty much.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not until like the curtain is lifted and you're like, oh, you know.
Mm.
Well, I think that's the journey that we're all on. You know, to find purpose and balance in our lives. You know, so like we've just spent the past 4 years way over on this side of things, right? And now the reaction is to go way to the other side to try and balance the scale, you know? And, one of the things that I learned a while ago that I try to incorporate into my life is that, like you were saying, why can't the left and the right come together and take a little bit, and like, to me, that's what balance is that balance is not right in the middle. And if you're right in the middle, then there's no movement. That's not balance. That's dead, right? Yeah. Balance is, like if you balance on one foot and you start leaning one way, what do? You give direction to the other way to bring yourself back, right? Mm-hmm. Not just to the middle, but you have to compensate, but then you have to compensate back. So you're always struggling between left and right and teetering. Like sometimes you have to be a disciplinarian and sometimes you're the fun parent. Sometimes, every situation is different. And so we all need to try and find that balance in our lives of like, I'm not always going to be the same. I'm going to change. I'm going to evolve. Like I'm a human being. That's the beauty of it, is that, that's what I used to tell the kids. It's like, this is the great thing about life. You get to choose. You get to choose.
Yeah.
Everything, do my homework, not do my homework, do it half-ass, do it, like you get to choose. Listen to my parents, don't listen to my parents.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the beauty of it, that we have these choices, and with those choices, there are consequences, right? These things go together and you need to make those decisions, right? And so with all of that, the comic is just a conduit to, whatever, to open the door, right? For other things. So I think, I'm not saying you should believe this or not believe that. Yes, do the comics lean a little to the left? Yeah, because that's kind of where I am in my life.
Yeah.
And, when certain issues hit me, I might lean a little bit to the right, and it might piss some people off who are like, oh my God, why are you saying that? It's like, well, because that's kind of where I'm leaning right now, or, I mean, I look at all the people who like my comics, right? Who follow, and there's a core, right? And then there are other people who I know and they only like certain ones. They have a choice. Am I angry? No, that's their right. Would I like it if they liked it? Sure, because it makes things look better and all that. But like certain ones speak to people and certain ones don't. And that's the beauty of our society, right? And of, why we can have this conversation,
And, when I came across your comic through Pat, I was very blown away that for once, you're taking a comic that most people would probably associate with, for obvious reasons, with Peanuts, because it has a very similar style, but you're adding a twist to it to make it unique, to stand out. That's what I believe. And I think it's working because it got my attention. And I'm also a fan of it now as well, too, because I'm actually looking at what you're putting on there and what you're providing. And there's some things that I've forgotten that with the last thing that we just talked about with Emmett Till. Oh yeah, it is his birthday today. He would have been 80. I didn't know that. I know who Emmett Till was. I just didn't know when he was born. But the fact that you put that out there, that is extremely important information that, reignited some thoughts that I had forgotten all about, that I had to reflect on, because it is a very important issue that needs to be delved into and talked about with everybody. There's a side of American history that most people don't even know, especially with Chinese American history, that most people aren't even aware of. And now that this has become more of a thing for people to commentate on and to bring more awareness here, I think it's a great opportunity for us to hopefully change the system, the education system, to bring more awareness to that part of American culture, where we are not using 1 month out of the year just to talk about it and bring the same topics over and over again and then move on to the next thing and then wait till next year to bring it up all again. No, that should be part of in our education system to bring that out, not just bring it out when we go to college. Put that into the system now with kids and let them learn about the racism and how, presidents weren't always making the best choices and hurting other people along the way. Let's bring that up to those kids and show them, hey, that's not good. This is why it's not good. Let's, what do you think would have been the best solution to fix this problem? I think we should have done this. I agree 100%. Billy, let's go up here and have you talk about some other ideas you want to share. Well, who else wants to join in on that too? Like that was really a great way to start a conversation. I think it really has to start with the education system, in my opinion. And I'm not the most educated person, but I do know that that is something that is very, very important for kids to be aware of. But the problem is that parents and most other people don't want to change that tradition because it's not right. It's, my kids can't handle that. I don't want them to know how to, how that racism exists. Why? Because now when they have to be confronted with it, they don't know how to handle it because they don't have the tools because you've never given the opportunity to learn that stuff. So things like this, I hope, would expose that.
Yeah. Well, it's clear the system needs to change.
Yeah.
I think that's what everyone's coming to. And I think, with things like Instagram, because it's so far reaching that, talking about the Emmett Till thing, right? It's like, oh, I forgot about that, right? That it can have this immediate impact. So I'm sure you've talked to someone in the past and they say something and you're like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, in the old days, only you and him know that because there's no one else. You can't share it, right? Now you can share that brilliant idea and the whole world could know, right? So I saw this one post today and the guy was like, he said, all you big spenders who are such poor tippers and always complained about restaurant workers saying, well, if you don't like making $2.35 an hour, go find another job. Guess what? All those fucking people went out and found another job. And now you're complaining because you don't have restaurant workers. Yeah. Right? I read that. I'm like, that's brilliant. But then you look and it's like, oh, wow, he's got, X amount of likes. Like he just spread that word about, hey, maybe instead of complaining, be a better tipper. Maybe, there are little things that we can do. And so now we live in this world where we can do that, where everyone has a brilliant idea. And now we can share that. And that brilliant idea can do its thing, through the ether and make change. And then those systems will change because people won't take it anymore. 4 million people quit their jobs in April in the US. 4 million. Because they're tired of shit.
Yeah.
I don't need to make $7.25 an hour. I'm going to follow my dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a very rough road. I think that's what most people are afraid of, is that they don't want to deal with the consequences of, all the highs and lows that come with that. It's,
but we just experienced the lowest of the low. And
no, I understand. I get that. I agree. I understand. It's just that I think when it comes to going out there and following the passion and really going out there to make a stand and make a difference for yourself, make a difference for other people, that's you're going to meet a lot of resistance. And that's that thing that most people don't care to confront and care to have to deal with. But again, that comes with the tools that aren't given to them to learn how to deal with that or learn how to communicate those things. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have, not just here in this country, but around the world too. I mean, some countries do it better than others. I agree. I think, but that's really the biggest thing. The education side of how to articulate your thoughts and how to confront the issues and how to handle that, how to be problem solvers. That's what I think it needs to be taught to everyone, starting when you're children.
And, one of the things that Patrick said to me, he's like, we're here for each other now. Now that we've met, now that we've talked, it's like, now we're together, and you need something, I need something. We're part of a community now.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the beauty of all of this is that, we've never met. We couple messages on Instagram and, and now forming this relationship of like, we're everywhere.
Yeah.
And we can connect.
Is there anything that you want to share before we sign off here, as far as any upcoming works that you have available that would be that people should be on the lookout for? Anything else that you have coming up that maybe people are not even aware of that is in the works that you might be share here?
Well, there's always stuff in the works, just trying to make it all happen. This is all new for me, and you know, I'm trying to make this, so it's been, since I've moved here to Florida, I'm going on week 2 now of this is my full-time gig, right? I'm not making any money off of it really, other than the supporters on Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon, you know, and I'm hoping that through things like that, you know, I just opened up the Patreon page with different membership tiers and hoping to generate some interest that way, you know, because like I said, you know, I finally have put my 2 passions together, and I need to find a way to have that be able to support me financially, you know. Right. My needs are pretty minimal, so I don't need to make a ton of money, you know, but I would love to be in that position where I am making money and I can actually give to organizations like the NAACP and the ACLU and, you know, Planned Parenthood and that sort of thing, where I can give back to my community. Because, you know, even though I didn't make a lot of money through my adulthood, I feel pretty, you know, fortunate and privileged in certain ways that I did not have to struggle the way I've seen other people struggle, you know. Yeah. And, you know, have I had a harder road than some? Sure. But there are people who've had much harder roads, you know. And I think trying to level the playing field and give everyone an opportunity, you know, and celebrate what makes each of us unique, you know. Yeah. And getting to that place. And I would love to see that in my son's future, in his present, you know, or his child, you know, or like down the road, like, you know, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. You know, but we need to plant the seeds. You know, when I was teaching, I would tell parents, it's like, there's gonna be a right time. You know, like when you eat a strawberry in December, it looks like a strawberry, right? It has all the characteristics. It's just not that sweet. But when you pick it and you get it in mid-July, oh my God, there's nothing like it, because that's the right time. And so
it's the best analogy.
I can greenhouse your children and I can force information into them, but it's going to be like that strawberry in December. You know, there's a right time, but we need to plant the seeds. We need to weed. We need to fertilize. We need to tend to that plant. And then when the time is right, it'll happen. And like strawberries, it'll shoot all its little runners all over the place. More strawberries will appear. And, you know, it's kind of what I'm doing. I'm kind of what you're doing, you know, like that's our gift now, right?
Yeah.
The world. So
yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm saying, it's planting more strawberries.
I love that analogy of the strawberry analogy. I will remember that moving forward. Well, listen, I want to thank you again for taking the time here, and I will make sure that I'll have all the social media links for your comics, and I also have links for Patreon, Buy Me Coffee, and what else have you here too? I think that's the only 2 that you have, as far as I'm concerned, for the sites here. Is that right? I know you have Instagram, and you also have your Twitter page. I'll also have that as well. Is there any other sites too that I might be forgetting here for you?
Well, there's a website on WordPress.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
That and yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to get all that stuff, and I'm learning all these things, you know. I just discovered TikTok, so I'm trying to figure that out, and you know, wanting to figure out how to make all this stuff and get it out there in the most accessible way, because, you know, everyone's into something different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all this stuff here too. It almost feels like a little overwhelming. There's some parts of me I'm like, oh my God, do I have to create another account for this? I'm like, oh.
Yep. So, I know. You know, yeah, so I would love to start animating again and turning all these into animations and just getting it out in more creative ways, you know. I'd love to have the Lindas maybe make a soundtrack for me. Who knows, right?
That would be very unique. I would love that, actually. I actually tried to reach out to them a while ago, just before, like when their video went viral for right. I forgot the name of that song off the top of my head. But anyway, so that's the one. Yes. So I saw, I was like, I got to talk to them. So I sent them out an email, and as soon as I sent out that email, they blew up, and I was like, okay, well, my chances of me talking with them, forget it. And they even said the next day, oh my God, ever since this video came out, we've got so many emails. I'm sorry, we can't reply to everybody. I was like, well, right. You can forget me then, because I am not going to talk to you now, because then like literally, I don't know, a week or 2 later, they were on Jimmy Kimmel. I was like, yeah, there was no way they're going to talk to me now.
I animated that.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
On my Instagram.
You know, I think I did see that. I think I did, because there's quite a few that you posted up there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll make sure I have the image for you, for people to see on this episode here. But listen, thank you very much. I can't thank you enough. Really, this means a lot to me. This really was a wonderful and meaningful conversation. So I appreciate your time. And this by far is the longest episode I've ever done. So I hope people will build up the endurance for that, because believe me, we talked a lot of things here. So, but I'm grateful. You have a wonderful evening, and stay safe out there, and cheers.
Thanks, Rob.
Have a good one.